Just like when we're using the terms like anti-Semitism or racism, we're talking about really, I think, two different phenomenon. One is a kind of vulgar hatred or dislike or abhorrence or rudeness to other people because of their background. And the other is a kind of larger cultural phenomenon that takes place in somewhat the same way that people who may feel that, well, the same way that race is talked about. Some people have an attitude about race which is very emotional, very personal, very subjective based on their own experiences. But I try to look at things historically. Why is, throughout the ages and why in our own time, is there this tension between Jews and non-Jews? Or for a larger, in a similar way, why is there a tension? Why are there problems between different ethnic and racial groups, not least in the Middle East, as we all know? And I like to think, everybody likes to think that we're not motivated and not moved by irrational or hateful feelings. And I don't feel any hatred for anyone, and I don't wish anybody ill because of his or her background. But so we try to, I think it's very important to understand this phenomenon, not in terms of, you might say, emotional trigger words like hate or fear, but to try to understand why this exists as a phenomenon, not only in the world we live in today, but in throughout the ages, in many different cultures over the centuries. Why has this tension, why has this problem existed of relations between Jews and non-Jews? In the article that you cited, I mentioned and cited Abraham Foxman and others too, who talk about anti-Semitism, as you'll oftentimes hear in the media, as a disease. It's a virus. We don't know where it comes from. It's an irrational hatred. And supposedly we have to fight it by, well, one answer they say is more Holocaust memorials and more Holocaust museums or more education. But that seems to me to miss the point of the larger phenomenon. Obviously, a phenomenon that has existed for many centuries isn't going to be tied into any one historical epic, the Holocaust, or any other one thing. But in the article that you cited, I also quoted Theodor Herzl. And I quoted Herzl because Herzl is well regarded, of course, by Israelis, by Zionists, by most Jews, because he's the founder of the modern Zionist movement. And his major book that began the Zionist movement is The Jewish State. And in The Jewish State and in other writings, Theodor Herzl also tries to come to this, to grips with this question of why does anti-Semitism exist? And the answer he provides is very, very different than the answer that Abraham Foxman or the ADL or many other people give. Theodor Herzl, I think, is much more realistic in saying that the fundamental reason that this problem exists is because Jews are a separate people with their own agenda, their own interests. It doesn't mean that a group that has its own interests or its own agenda is bad or evil, but inevitably different groups have different perceptions about things and different agendas, different priorities about how problems should be dealt with. And if Jews exist in a society of non-Jews and at the same time say, well, we're just like you, we're part of the same society, while simultaneously maintaining a separate identity and a separate loyalty, that inevitably is going to lead to problems. And that's why I say that anti-Semitism, I think, exists and has existed because there's no way to peacefully or easily reconcile these irreconcilable differences. That is, these irreconcilable objectives, both to be considered the same and citizens like everyone else in a society, while at the same time maintaining a separate identity with separate objectives and separate goals. So that's basically the